Logic, we'll do this fairly briefly, but Ghazali played a central role in the formal adoption of logic into the Islamic curriculum. Muslim scholars had always thought in logical ways. Abu Hanifa, very logical in his thinking, so was Shafi'i, so was Malik. Logic in terms of thinking clearly, in terms of not contradicting yourself, has of course been there from the beginning, and every culture and every civilization has been founded on logical principles. What the Greeks did was they formalized the logical principles. They formalized them. So they said, if all A is B and all B is C, then all A is C. Right? Now that's obvious when you think about it. Okay? If all dogs are mammals and all mammals are animals, then clearly all dogs must be animals. Because you've got dogs, and they're part of animals, dogs which are part of mammals, which are part of animals. So you've got 3 circles, right? And if you're this little circle, and you're in the medium-sized circle, then you must be in the big circle too. Okay? So that's what logic is, and the Greeks formalized this. Aristotelian logic was the great formulation of logic, basically, right? And all these principles were put down. Ghazali took those principles, he said, yes, this is good. In the 2 years that he spent studying philosophy, he said, this is good stuff. What he did, he incorporated it into the teaching of religion. Okay? And he made it, because of his prestige, he made it acceptable to formally study logic. Okay? He was deeply schooled in Aristotelian logic and effectively championed its usage. He removed a lot of the suspicion towards logic. Because people said, logic, that's like philosophy. It's a bit like me saying to you, it's okay to study biology. Oh no, but that's the stuff of evolution. I don't study biology. No, it's okay to study biology. Just watch out, just know your doctrine well. But then yes, by all means go and study biology. Go study genetics. Go and be a geneticist. Go and find a medication that targets genes found specifically in cancer cells, so you can find this mystical magic bullet that will only kill the cancer cells and nothing else. By all means, go and do that. There's no problem doing that, as long as you understand your theology well. Yeah? But there was a lot of suspicion about logic, because logic is those weird Greeks, and those are those weird Greeks that say all these other weird things as well. And what Ghazali did again was that filtering process. In the Mi'yarul Ilm, he reformulated logic in fiqhi terms. Okay? In Qistas al-Mustaqim, which was the just balance or the straight balance, what he did very interestingly, he demonstrated the 5 main syllogisms of formal logic from the Quran. From the Quran. He took the Quran and he said, here is an example of a conditional syllogism. Here is an example of a a connective syllogism. Here is an example of a disjunctive conditional syllogism. If A, there is no B. If the sun is shining, it is not night. And he showed examples from the Quran of all these formal syllogisms. Okay? Right. And he says, for example, in Al-Mustasfa, knowledge is of 3 kinds. Purely rational, with no shari'i connotations, like maths. Then purely revelatory sciences, like hadith and tafsir, right? Which are not difficult, he says. But the noblest sciences are those where reason and revelation are combined, such as fiqh and usul. They can neither be manipulated by reason, such that the sharia could not accept them, nor are they entirely based on blind following, such that reason cannot attest to them. Okay? Okay? Then we come to Ghazali in terms of philosophy. So again, just a brief history of philosophy. What have you got? You've got the ancient philosophical systems. So again, it's a quick history lesson, 3-minute history lesson. You've got the ancient philosophical systems, right? And of them, the greatest of them was a Greek philosophy. You had Hindu philosophy, you had Buddhist philosophy, you had all sorts of different types, but they were very mystical and spiritual. The one that was really rationally based was Greek philosophy, Hellenistic philosophy. And you had a number of different figures there. In around the 2nd century, during the Khilafah of Ma'mun, one of the Abbasid Caliphs, you have the establishment of something called Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. And the House of Wisdom was perhaps the greatest translation and adoption of knowledge project until modern times, that had ever been seen in the world until modern times. Basically, you could bring any work from anyone to the House of Wisdom and translate it into, and it would be translated into Arabic. So in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, there were works, the Vedas were translated into Arabic. Okay, you had, the great Persian works translated into Arabic. And you had a huge number of Greek works translated into Arabic. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and so forth. All of these were translated into Arabic. It was the greatest intellectual endeavor that the world had ever seen, pretty much until Wikipedia. Pretty much until Wikipedia. It was the ancient equivalent of Wikipedia. In some circumstances, depending on your prestige and the work that you were translating and how valuable it was, you would be paid the weight of the manuscript in gold. That's what would be your payment. So you'd get, and of course what you would do is write big. You'd write big and get the weighty manuscript, stick it at one end of the scale, gold would be filled up to the other end of the scale until they balance, and that was your fee. Okay? This was an amazing thing, the translation movement. But, of course, what it did was introduce a whole lot of chaos. Because now you've got access to all these different ideas, different thoughts, and so forth, and especially Greek philosophy had very significant effects. Shiism, we've spoke about it last week, the Ikhwan al-Safa, the Brethren of Purity they were called, the Mu'tazilis, and Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi, they introduced a whole lot of confusion. Because, yes, you've got all this stuff now suddenly in Arabic, but you don't know what to do with it. You don't have a balance in your own mind. You don't have a standard yourself to know how to weigh up this Quran and the Sunnah. And remember that knowledge of Arabic and stuff had weakened at this stage. So what the Sahaba took from Quran and Sunnah is not what people in the 3rd century were taking from Quran and Sunnah. Yeah? And you've got all these other fashionable ideas about, mutual contradiction and syllogisms, and it sounds really exciting. Okay? What did Ghazali do? Ghazali was par excellence the philosopher theologian. Subki says he came when people were more in need of guidance than a traveler in the darkest of nights is in need of a light. Alright? The Muslim world was in danger of being overwhelmed by this, as Christian theology was overwhelmed by Greek philosophy. All these ideas about Trinity, about Jesus being God but man at the same time, being the Son of God but also God, these were all on the basis of Gnostic ideas that were present at that time, at the turn of the millennium, and the effects of Greek philosophy and of the philosophies of the Near East. And a very similar thing was in danger of happening in Islam. And so the response was, philosophy is all of the traditionalists. So you've got the right wing and the left wing. The right wing, the traditionalists, the Ahlul Hadith and so forth, saying basically all this stuff is kufr. Just forget all of it. Stick to the Hadith. Right? Because it was at this time also in the Muslim world, 4th, 6th centuries, you have the rise of the Hadith movement. The Hadith assumed now a central importance intellectually. Why? It was a reaction to Greek philosophy. Everyone knew the Hadith were important. But that important, that crucial, the Hadith it was never called the Quran movement. It was called the Hadith movement. Why? Because as a source of revelation, yeah, we all accept that. But that wasn't the question in the 3rd and 4th centuries. The question was, okay, it's a source of revelation. So, we've got minds, we've got brains. Which takes precedence? Your intellect or what's in the Hadith? And this was the great, there have been a number of iterations of this debate over the course of the centuries. But at this stage it was, should reason take precedence or should revelation take precedence? What did Ghazali do? He brought them together. He brought them together. He said, reason, if it is sound, supports revelation. So yes, you can use reason. Yes, you can use logical principles. Yes, you can incorporate philosophical ideas. But in defense of what is already present in revelation. And those aspects of philosophy that are contrary to revelation can be demonstrated to be illogical. And that's the thing. Ghazali did not disprove the problematic elements of philosophy from revelation. He disproved the problematic elements of philosophy from philosophy. He used philosophy itself to show the incoherence of those ideas of philosophers. That's why the work is not called Tahafut al-Falsafa, not the incoherence of philosophy, but Tahafut al-Falasifa, the incoherence of the philosophers. He basically, and we'll do this when we look next week, I'll explain it to you from learning theory, but he basically said, Aristotle was a master of philosophy. Ibn Sina was a master of philosophy. Guess what? I'm a master of philosophy too. Want proof? Here's Maqasid al-Falasifa. Here's my work. Take it, read it, tell me if there's any deficiency in my understanding of philosophy. No? Okay. Here's what Aristotle got wrong. Here's what Plato got wrong. Here's what Socrates got wrong. Here's what Ibn Sina got wrong. Here's what Farabi got wrong. And here's why. That was the Tahafut. And then he produced a third work called the Mi'yar al-Ilm, which is basically his work in logic, great work in logic, so that you understand what I've written in the Maqasid, and you understand what I've written in the Tahafut. Here's a glossary. Here is a glossary. This is how logic works. Read this work, then go back and read the Maqasid, then go and read the Tahafut, and then you will see. These are the beneficial aspects of philosophy. These are things that are okay. Here are the detrimental ones. 20 points, only 20 points in the Tahafut. He critiqued 20 points. A brilliant critique. 17 of them he said they are bid'ah. 3 he said are kufr. Now that's astounding when you think about it. Ghazali said 3 things that philosophers say are kufr. Only 3. The rest of them, 17, are bid'ah. Everything else, it's alright. That's staggering when you think about it, given the context of the time. But he could say it. He had the chutzpah to say it. Why? Because he had the chops. He was Juwayni II. He was Shafi'i II. He was the great scholar of fiqh. He was the umda of the Shafi'i madhab. He was the developer of legal, the great developer of legal theory. It had nothing to do with the ihya. It had to do with what he did before it. He was all of those things, and he did this before the ihya. All of this was Ghazali still in his learning curve. He hasn't hit peak yet. He hits peak in the ihya. Okay? So this was his supreme achievement, to incorporate the unproblematic elements of philosophy into theology so completely, and this is the great thing, so completely did he incorporate the unproblematic elements of philosophy into theology that you no longer needed to study philosophy. From Ghazali's time onwards, if you studied theology, you had all the philosophy you needed. And at this point, the study of philosophy in the Muslim world just went, why? Not because, can't study philosophy. It was, you don't need to. It's all in kalam. Okay?